last year was that while they will say in this environmental impact statement, we find everything is satisfactory based on they've met all the safety standards or environmental standards. Everything's fine as long as it's in that big concrete dome. Once this radiation gets out of that dome, it's just a mess. I stood 30 kilometers from this, just outside of the evacuation zone. And we have something called a gamma spectrometer. You can identify what the radioisotopes are. I could see cesium on the ground in low levels, but it was spread all across Japan. And so that country has been irreparably changed by this experience. And that's part of the risk that we will take if this project is approved. So what I would like to take you through tonight are three things. One, what are the lessons we can learn from Fukushima? Two, how are those applicable to Darlington as a project? And three, what are the problems with this environmental assessment? What information are they holding back that a credible environmental assessment should have? So to start, it's important to understand in this document, that screening report, they use the word safe over and over and over. I guess if you did a word search and you search for safety versus risk, you'd see the word safety a lot more. And it's important to understand how the CNSC and OPG use the word safety, because they're using it in a way that normal people wouldn't. So when the nuclear industry says something is safe, what they really mean is they believe, in their theory, there will be a meltdown only once every million years of reactor operation. So that's when they say safety, that's what they mean. And that may, I just heard some people go, yeah, it seems not normal, and it's not. But this is their theory, and this is what they've been promoting for the past several decades. When they say we should opt for nuclear power, it has some problems, but it's basically safe. Well, that's their theory. Now, there's about 440 reactors operating in the world today. And so if you add up all the reactor hours or years, there's about 14,000 that have taken place. We've had 5 meltdowns. So their theory, we're not seeing in reality. Usually, if the facts change, you change your theory. But we haven't seen that out of this industry, from OPG, from the province, or the regulator yet. Other countries have said, yeah, the theory's way off. Japan, Germany, Belgium, Switzerland. And they're all just simply saying this risk isn't worth it. But in this environmental impact statement, they're still relying on this despite Fukushima. And a normal person has the right to say, I do not accept that. So what we're seeing in reality is we're seeing a major nuclear accident somewhere in the world once every 10 years. It's not a low probability event, it's a regular event. So you could accept that. And if you are going to accept that, there's some other things we should do. We'll talk about that. But that's the difference between they use the word safety and perhaps how we would use the word safety. And so what is the lesson from Fukushima? Well, we'll hear this from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and Ontario Power Generation, that, well, that doesn't matter because we're in Ontario and there's not going to be a level 8 earthquake followed by a tsunami. It just won't happen on Lake Ontario, so don't worry about that. Well, the fact of the matter is, Japan, the Japanese, are experts in earthquake risks and tsunamis. They advise other countries in the world on how to protect their reactors from tsunami risks. 2 weeks before the Fukushima disaster happened, they gave a life extension to the Fukushima station. They said, just go ahead, it's a bit of a rubber stamp. Unfortunately, what we've learned post the accident is both TEPCO, the operator of Fukushima reactors, and the regulator in Japan had the risk studies that showed they should expect such a tsunami about once every 1,000 years. What did they do about it? Nothing. They knew about the risk, they had it in their studies, but they did not act. This is something called institutional failure. When you get institutions regulating very complex industries and they become in their own worldview, they just start dismissing risk, that's when you get these big accidents. And so there's other examples of it. If you go back in history through 3 Mile Island and the Chernobyl disaster, you'll see similar conclusions saying it was institutional failure. The banking crisis in 2009, big complex industry, institutional failure. The oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, institutional failure. So what they're going to say to us over and over again is this technology is robust, we have defense in depth, we can prevent these accidents. But in reality, it's not the technology, it's the humans and their institutions causing those accidents. And I've been to Japan, we're not so different from the Japanese. So that's one of the first lessons, and this has not been acknowledged by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. So we're seeing an empirical probability, but once every 10 years, somewhere in the world we're seeing an accident. That's a lesson. That's how we should be thinking about this risk. Some countries have opted to just get out of nuclear altogether. We haven't done that yet. But another lesson is we need independent regulators. One of the lessons in Japan, one of the first things they did is their nuclear regulator was under the same ministry that promotes nuclear power. And that's where they got into this problem of just like, that's not a problem. So these are lessons from Fukushima that you're not going to find in that report. And I can tell you that because I asked them to put it in its environmental review. I participated in the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission's Fukushima Task Force. I presented there in May. I presented this Greenpeace report, for example, that we put out. The probability number I presented. And it was very funny how the commission reacted. One of the commissioners said to their staff, Greenpeace has this very hard and fast number that once every 10 years, somewhere in the world, we were seeing an accident. How do you react to that? And what did the staff say? Well, Greenpeace just divided. Simple division. They dismissed it. I've had a scientist since then who saw my presentation from Carleton call me up and say, oh, you're completely correct. They're way off. You should be putting empirical data into your models, and they're not doing it. We asked them to at least acknowledge institutional failure in the Fukushima review. They refused. They said it was out of scope. They just looked at tsunami risks and earthquake risks. And in this EA review as well, when there was a draft document, I just asked for them to put it in writing. Just say, one of the causes of Fukushima was institutional failure. They refused to even put those words in the document. This document is so sanitized. And it's not just Greenpeace saying this. A month after I presented to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, the Japanese government put out their own report on causes of Fukushima, and it came to the exact same conclusion: institutional failure. So, and why should we be concerned about this? Well, if humans and regulatory bodies are part of the cause of accidents, we need to be worried about it in Canada because we have similar conditions. So the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, the commission that watchdogs nuclear safety in Canada, well, you may forget this because we're all so obsessed with pipelines now. But before we were politicizing pipeline reviews, the Harper government fired the former president of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. It's this woman, Linda Keane. And I'll tell you this, there was still love lost between me and Linda Keane while she was here. But now that she's gone, I kind of miss her. And why did they fire Linda Keane? Well, one of the things she was doing was she was imposing modern international nuclear safety standards on Canadian nuclear operators. She said this after being fired. She said basically SNC-Lavalin, the company that wants to get the contract to rebuild Darlington, hired Hill and Knowlton to get her fired. And the Harper government accepted. It's her words, not ours. So here we have an instance. This sent a signal to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. We want to promote. We prioritize nuclear risks or making money over protecting Canadians. So this is a situation that we have a problem with. I asked the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission in May, and you should acknowledge what happened in Japan. Just ask the federal government to take you out from the ministry that promotes nuclear power. So it's the same here as it was in Japan. They refused to do that. So how can we, those are some of the lessons from Fukushima. And are there parallels here in Canada that we should be concerned about in regard to the decision, looming decision on Darlington? Well, one of the big ones is, here's a Google Earth shot of the Darlington nuclear station. So you see there's 4 reactors there. You'll notice at Fukushima as well, there's 4 reactors. Ontario and Japan are one of the rare places on Earth where we build reactors in big sets. We're building them in sets of 4. And in the past, what they would have said is, well, an accident in more than one of those reactors, that's such a low probability we don't even want to think about it. It's not worth thinking about it. It's not credible.